Seated. Well, good morning. Good to see you. Glad that you're here. And as Wesley said, if you're a guest, man, thank you so much for coming today. I know some of you came to help us celebrate in baptism, and some of you are here maybe looking for a church home or maybe walking through some things. You're looking for answers. Man, we're glad that you're here this morning, as Wesley said. My name's Ben, and I have the privilege of serving as pastor here. And I want to tell you, man, I am grateful that God has saw fit to let me and my family be back in Sterlington, and we wouldn't be anywhere else. And this morning, I want to talk to you. If you've got a Bible, I want to invite you to Matthew chapter 11. I'm going to take it was not a planned break. We're going to take a little break from 1 Peter, come back next week in the book of 1 Peter. But I want to this morning just to speak to you kind of out of the reality of just where I am, and I think where a lot of you probably are as well. And I do want to acknowledge in the room, and we don't often talk about a lot of things outside of here that are going on, but this past week was a really difficult week, especially on Friday for our elementary folks and middle school students and elementary students with the loss of Miss Ross. And our community is reeling from that a little bit and learning about life after that. And so I just want to encourage you, church, to be praying for those folks. I've been so encouraged by so many of you in our community, the way that you have rallied to some folks who are hurting and been the hands and feet of Jesus Friday and beyond. And so I trust that we'll continue to do that together. And it's always interesting to me to see the way that our town, our community rallies to one another in times of need. And so I see God at work in that, and hope that you will be looking for his work, and then too be part of his work in those things. And so I want to talk to you just out of some of those things, because I think for me, what Friday and even yesterday have kind of done is kind of exposed some things within me. And so I want to just talk to you kind of out of where I'm at with that. Here's the reality. You and I live in a world that is tired. Would you agree with that? We're just tired. And it's tired in all kinds of ways, right? Tired physically, tired mentally, emotionally, spiritually. You pick the category. Most folks will agree they're tired. And when it comes to physical tired, I think probably there's no better place to see that than the number of energy drinks that now exist in our world, right? It used to be you had to drink strong coffee if you want a little energy. Now we got every fruit flavor under the sun that you can get a little energy for. If you go in, I don't know if you've been in a convenience store lately, but if you go into the energy drink section, and it's like 50 or 60. I can't even keep up with all the different types of Monster and Red Bull and Celsius and AHA, and there's another one, Alani. I think I'm missing some there. But there's all kinds of these things. Why? Because people are tired. And they're like, man, we gotta get through. We gotta push through. And so we're looking for that kick. We're looking for that thing. But I don't know if you've noticed this or not, especially when it comes to a physical tired. You can drink all that caffeine you want to, but after you have kind of exerted the energy that you needed to, what happens? That's the way it feels, right? Like you just are tapped out. And so what do? You run back to the store and you grab another one, and you're hoping, Lord, please don't let my heart explode this time. And you drink it again, right? And you're hoping to just get through. And then mentally tired. Where do you go mentally? Well, where do you go mentally to rest your mind and try to get through? Well, a lot of us, man, we binge watch Netflix, or we turn on a ball game, or, man, we withdraw from people, and we just like a quiet, dark room. Can I get an amen? Like we just kind of withdraw, and we have ways of dealing with that. But the problem even there is when you come out of that space or out of that Netflix show, when you reached episode 20 of season 20, and it's over, like what's still going on? You are right back into the race. Right back into the things. Emotionally, the same way. We do things to try to numb ourselves from feeling whatever it is we're feeling. Remember, as a parent, when my kids were small, that, and some of you will identify with this, I'm not saying that my kids were crybabies. They may be watching this, so I will not say that. That's not what I'm saying, right? Everybody agree? But when they were small, they cried about everything. Like, really? It would be a day-wrecking decision if we served red Kool-Aid and not grape Kool-Aid. Like ruin it all, like totally melt down, everything's ruined. I can remember even taking my kids to Disney World, which is known as the happiest place on earth, and telling them no once. And the happiest place on earth was no longer the happiest place on earth. It was the most miserable place on earth. But just, I remember when I would see that, and they would do that, and dads, you may identify with this more, because moms, I know that you're more caring, and you tend to be the nurturer in the house. But when my kids would do that, do you know what I would tell them? Stop it. Stop it. Stop crying. We're not going to cry about that. That's not a big deal. It doesn't matter. And that's the way I would parent. Don't judge me. Some of y'all are just as bad. But I would tell them, hey, stop that. We don't cry about small things. You save that for bigger things. The problem was I don't know that I've done a good job of teaching them the difference, right? And so here's what I would do, though. What I was doing in that moment was I was teaching my kids not to feel what they were feeling. I was telling them that their response to what was going on, it didn't match what was actually happening. But as a 4-year-old or a 3-year-old, the reality is that it did. It did. They really wanted the grape Kool-Aid. And I, in my all-knowing wisdom, wouldn't give them what they wanted. And it hurt them. And so they had to learn to process. And what I'm afraid of in my own heart and sometimes in our own life is when it comes to spiritual rest and emotional rest, sometimes what we've done is we've told ourselves, hey, don't cry about that. Don't feel that. That's not the way that you should be. And here is the result of that. We are exhausted from carrying burdens and loads and trying to push through things that we just can't. And I don't know if you've noticed this or not. The way that I'll phrase this is I was going to tell you that life is hard, but here's the reality. I think you've heard that enough. You don't want to know the truth? Let's just be honest for a moment. Life is life. It is what it is. But here's the reality. Life is made up of incredible moments. And life is made up of some moments that feel like you're underneath the earth, right? But that is what life is. There's no avoiding all those things. I mean, we hope for more high moments than low moments, but the reality is sometimes those things balance out, and sometimes it feels like it's just the opposite. That we're under all of this weight, and we're trying to figure it out, and life's hard. And I really, Friday morning, when things began to happen in our community, I found myself about midday just tired. Not tired of people, not tired of doing what I'm doing, but just, it's a lot. It's a lot. And so trying to put on a face of strength for people and, hey, I'm going to hold it together so you don't have to. And here's what I've learned, and here's what I hope I can teach you in just a moment. That what people most need from us as believers and followers of Jesus is not projections of strength. They just need us to be with them in their weakness. But if we're not careful, we'll spend all of our energy trying to portray something that we're not. Which is why I'm glad that Jesus knew that about us. In Matthew chapter 11, Jesus is he's addressing a crowd of people, mostly his disciples and some other folks who are around, and Jesus knows their story. He knows what they've been through. He knows what they're going on. He knew that collectively as a nation. He knows what the Jewish people and the Samaritans and others who are part of his group, he knows what they've been through collectively. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that God knows collectively our story and what we face. But Jesus also knew their stories individually. He didn't just know their story, he knew individual stories. He knew what it was like to be Peter the fisherman who has been called to be this rock and to be a part of what he's doing in the kingdom. And he knew what it was like to be Andrew and Bartholomew and Judas. He knew what their stories were. Mary and Martha and Lazarus, he knew all that they had been through. And so he knows what they're bearing and he knows what they're doing. He knows them religiously. He knows that in their religious system, it's all about carrying this weight of trying to make sure that you keep God happy. And Jesus understood the burdens and the weight that they were carrying. And he's come into this moment in Matthew chapter 11. He's taught them a lot of things about the kingdom. He's told them about what's going on. He's even had some who've come and asked him from John the Baptist, who was supposed to be was one of the greatest men who had ever lived, about who he is and what he's about. And even John the Baptist was carrying some things on his shoulders that he didn't know what to do with. And Jesus, looking at that group of people, writes these words in Matthew chapter 11, beginning in verse 28. Well, there's a lot of things in here, but I want to focus on these last 3 verses of chapter 11. Here's what Jesus said to these people whose stories he knew. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. What did Jesus say to these people that were carrying these loads, who were trying to figure out their lives, who were trying to understand how to get through the next few moments? What did he say to them? He said, come to me. and I will give you rest. If you're taking notes this morning, I want you to write this down because I think we're all looking for it in some way or some form. Number one, I want you to see that Jesus gave them the starting place for rest. The starting place of rest. How does verse 28 begin? Jesus doesn't just say, hey guys, stop doing what you're doing. Everybody just put down your pens, put down your shovels and your axes, put down all your tools, and everybody just hush and go into a dark room and just stay still. That's not what he said. He said to them actively, come to me. Come to me. Well, what does that invitation, what does that command entail? It entails leaving where you are and coming to where he is, right? If I invite you to come to my house, you can't do that by staying at your house, right? I mean, it doesn't work that way. In order for you to make the trip to my house, you've got to physically move yourself from where you are to where I live. And so Jesus looks at this group of people who are struggling and are trying to push through and trying to move, and he says to them, come to me. Well, why is that important? Ben, why would you focus on that? Because when you and I are exhausted, what we tend to do is we stop. I say it this way, we get stuck. We've got too many questions and not enough answers. There's too much chaos and too much hurt, and so we just get stuck. Sure, we might go to work and we might do the things that this week requires, but we're just stuck in all those ways that we talked about, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. We just get stuck. And to people who feel stuck, Jesus says, come to me. Come here. It's an active decision to come from where you are to where he is. But I want you to see the second part of this. It's not just the invitation to come, it's also look at who he tells to come. Now, I would agree with you that Jesus has given an open invitation to anyone who would hear his voice to come to him, to follow him, to be with him. But in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, who did he say could come? All you who labor and are heavy laden. All you who labor and are heavy laden. That's the only people in verse 28 that Jesus is inviting to come to him and to be given rest. Well, what does that mean? Well, surely you've heard this verse before and you're thinking, man, then that's everybody. Well, Jesus knew that, but Jesus also knew that if you were stuck and unwilling to admit that you were stuck, you'd never move. Until you would come to a place where you would be able to say, I am laboring and I am heavy laden, I am beat down, I am carrying too much of a load. Until you could admit that you were tired, you would never come. Parents, again, I'll give you an illustration. Your kids ever been tired but wouldn't admit it? They ever been tired and wouldn't admit it? Like you know it's bedtime and they're like climbing the walls. You're thinking, how do you have so much energy? They don't. They're trying to fake you out. It's a trick. Don't fall for it. Right? They're exhausted, and as soon as you get them still, what happens? Exactly. Every time. Because they don't know what to do. And until you can get them to be still, get them to understand, hey, I really am tired, they won't rest. And here Jesus says to some grown people, hey, you've got to admit that you're tired. You're moving, and you've got all the actions, and you're doing all the things, but you are exhausted. And you're trying to operate out of a position of strength when you really need to just be identifying in your weakness. But until you will admit, I'm tired, this load is too heavy, you'll never come. And look, the reality is that in our culture, you're not even encouraged to admit that really out loud because there's stuff to do. The calendar's full. Bills are got to be paid. There's places to go and people to see. There's so much that we have to be a part of. I can't admit that I'm tired. I can't really stop. I can't find rest. I mean, sure, there's moments that we might stop, but I would bet you there's a lot of you in the room that even when you stopped, you're not stopped. That even when you're stopped, you're thinking about what's tomorrow. Some of you right now, you're glancing at your phone and your watch, not because I've talked too long, but because you know you've got somewhere to be this afternoon. You've got a meeting that you've got to go to tomorrow. You've got something on Tuesday that you're not looking forward to. You know what Wednesday has and Thursday has, and even right now, why it looks like we're stopped. We're not stopped. I know that because that's the way that I tend to live. Now, you ever had a day off and you spent your whole day off doing what activities there was to do, but at the end of the day, really what you did was just think about all the things you had to do the next day? And then you get up the next day like, why am I tired? I was off yesterday. You weren't off. You and I don't stop. We just keep pushing ourselves and we keep trying to do it on our own. And so Jesus says to people who are wrestling with that and people who will admit it, come to me. And then he says, I will give you rest. What's he offering? Is he offering a nap? Because I think I would sign up for that at this point, right? What's he offering? It's not just a nap. The word rest here, it does have a sense of recovering energy and of stopping and of movement and those things. But it's more than that. Because if you look at the life of the men and women who followed Jesus, that's what they did. They followed Jesus. And so this rest that he's telling them, I'm going to give you, what is it? It is a life-giving relationship. I don't know how many relationships you have in your life, but I can tell you for a fact that the only truly life-giving relationship that you have that doesn't need anything, that person doesn't need anything from you, is your relationship with Jesus. There's ways that you and I can encourage one another and stir one another up, but at the end of the day, you and I have a reciprocal relationship. You're going to need things from me from time to time, and I'm going to need things from you, and it can be life-giving, but sometimes it can also be burden-giving. The stuff that has to be done. But what Jesus invited this group of people to, and I would say is inviting you and I into, is a real life-giving relationship where he doesn't need anything from you. He doesn't need you to take the trash out. He doesn't need you to figure out this week's schedule for him. He doesn't need you taking his calls. He doesn't need you answering emails for him. He just wants you to be with him. And so he says, come to me, and I'm going to give you rest. I just wonder for some of us in the room, when you think about your relationship with Jesus, do you use the words life-giving? That it's a place that I find joy. It's a place that I find life. It's what gets me through the hardest moments in my life. I mean, I know for me, sometimes my relationship with the Lord, sometimes it feels like it's just another burden to carry. And I'm worried about how much I'm doing and how well I'm doing spiritually, and I'm not just slowing down and being with him. And yet what he said was, come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. If you and I want to even begin to understand, begin to begin this process of resting, the first steps are to come to Jesus and admit where you are. Lord, here's where I am. Here's the questions I don't have answers to. Here's what I'm carrying. And you know what he's promised? He's going to exchange it for rest. He's going to exchange it for something more. The second thing that he talks about is not just the starting place, but number two, he talks about a rest that is continuing. Look again at verse 29. He says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Now, it's interesting that Jesus has promised to give rest, and now in verse 29, there's like some more instructions, like take my yoke upon you and learn from me, and you're going to find rest. Well, wait, Lord, you said you were going to give rest. Why do I have to go looking for it? That doesn't seem restful. I've got enough to do, right? So why are we having to look and to search? I mean, and then the word yoke in the first century, there's nobody that heard Jesus use the word yoke and thought, well, that sounds more fun than what I'm doing. The word yoke was used for farm animals, for mules. It's what they would have to pull things with and carry things with. And so as they're hearing this, like, Lord, whoa, take your yoke? Lord, do you not know what I got to do today? Do you not know what my kids need and my husband needs and my employer needs? Do you not know what the emperor wants from us and the king wants from us? We don't have time for another yoke. But the yoke that Jesus was talking about, he wasn't asking them to take it in addition to. He was asking them to take it instead of. And he says, when you take my yoke upon you, you're going to find rest. You're going to find what you're looking for. You're not naturally going to find rest. You're not naturally going to get more energized. You're going to have to do some things differently. And Jesus says, hey, what I want you to do differently is not something in addition to. I want you to do some things instead of. I want you to take my yoke upon you. And he says, and learn from me. You see, the yoke also has the image of guiding. You'd often see two mules hooked together, and the guy that would steer it, he was controlling those animals to take them where they needed to be and to accomplish what they needed to accomplish. And the picture here is almost, it's not like, just like you and I yoked together. It's almost as if Jesus is saying, hey, if you'll come to me and take, whose yoke? My yoke. My yoke, the way that I want to guide you, the way that I want, the things that I want to do in your life. If you'll take that on you, I'm going to walk beside you because you're going to learn from me. You're going to learn from me. I'm going to show you what real life looks like. I'm going to show you how to get through difficult things. Because I don't know if you remember this or not, but last week when Chad was here, he mentioned this, and I thought about it again this morning. One of the terms that was used to describe Jesus, you've got Son of God, Son of Man, Lion of Judah. You've got all these incredible Alpha and Omega, beginning and end, but you've also got a man of sorrows. A man of sorrows. A man who knew what it was like to lose friends. A man who knew what it was like to have his best friends betray him. A man who knew what it was like to have people that he loved and created drive nails through his hands and his feet. A man who knew what it was like in his greatest hour of need to be all by himself. A man who knew what it was like to carry a load that seemed greater than what he could do. He was a man of sorrows. And so when the man of sorrows says to this people, hey, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, he's not saying, hey, let me tell you how to do things I don't know anything about. He's saying, learn from me because I'm about to go through some things and have been through some things where I can take you through it. I can take you through it. I mean, let's be honest. The best advice that you've ever been given in your life in difficult times came from people who went through those things, not from people who watched a YouTube video. Not from people who read a book about sorrow and grief. Not from people who had a cousin twice removed who went through something difficult. It came from people who had been where you are. And Jesus says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. Learn from me and you'll find rest. He's telling them, hey, come to me. Begin to live life with me. Let me show you some things. But then I don't want you to miss what's right in the middle of the verse. He said, for I am gentle and lowly in heart. Now, I know maybe you and I just want to rush past that like, oh, that's nice. Jesus is just telling us he's a nice guy. That's not what he's doing. It's a comparison. I mean, think about the first century and who their leaders were and who their power figures were. I mean, from guys that were in the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the religious leaders of the day, to kings and governors and all the way to Rome, to the emperor, those men in power were never described as gentle and lowly in heart. But that's not how they were described. But they had a yoke for the people. They had a burden for the people, the way that they wanted things done, the way that they demanded that things be done. And Jesus says, look, I'm not like any leader you've ever had in your life. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm saying come with me and let's do it together. Because I know where we're going. I know what you need. I know what you need, and I'm able to give you everything that you need. You see, part of this learning to come to Jesus and to find rest is just learning to stay with him. It doesn't mean that there's no burdens. It doesn't mean that there's not anything difficult. It just means that you and I are learning to trust the one who we've come to. That we're learning to stay right with him. And Jesus says, look, I'm not asking you to just do what I say. I'm asking you to learn it from me. Take my yoke upon you. Because this is who I am. And to continue in this rest is to continue to learn to trust in him. Now, some of you are like, preacher, that's just good church talk. Let's just learn to trust in Jesus, trust and obey, for there's no other way. But listen to me. I'm telling you, the older I get and the more that I learn about this, I think we've overcomplicated all of this stuff. Are there some deep, hard truths in Scripture? Without a doubt. And if you don't believe me, just go read the book of Leviticus and then send me an email. Like, there's some hard things, like, what is that all about? But learning to trust in Jesus, I think it's simple. I think it's simple. Preacher, how can you say that? Do you not know all the commands to forgive our enemies and to pray for those who persecute us and to help all the poor? And look, I know all those things. But what I know that is different between Christianity and every other religion that exists in the world is every other religion says, do these things and that God, that higher power will notice you and bless you. What God has said is, I already know you and bless you. Now come walk with me as we do all these things that I've said. That's why the burden is different. I'm not over here trying to do good things and saying, God, please see me today. Please see me today. Would you just notice me today? Oh, you didn't notice me today. He didn't see me. He didn't catch me today. No, Christianity says, good morning, Lord. Thanks for loving me. Let's do whatever you want to do today. I love that we sang Christ Be Magnified this morning. It's one of my favorite songs right now. It's kind of on repeat. And I'm trying to pray that when I have to do different things, and some good, some difficult, all those. Lord, would you just in some way, somehow, would you just be magnified to me? You're already in me. Would you just help me to magnify you? Just because I know how good you are. In fact, one of the verses that we looked at in 1 Peter this morning says that in chapter 2, verse 3, at the end it says that you have tasted and seen that the Lord is good. Man, I know that. Like, I'm not trying to figure that out. I've experienced that. And that's the one who says to these people, hey, continue with me. But then let me show you the third thing in verse 30. So the starting place, the continuing, and the number 3, I want you to see the weight of trusting. Verse 30, he says, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Really what Jesus is doing in verse 30 is saying, which way you want to go? Which way do you want to go in your life? You can choose to keep doing what you're doing. That's what he was telling the people. They're already saying, Lord, if you're heavy and laden and laboring, that's me. That's the way I feel. Even this morning when I asked you if you're tired and if you're exhausted, a lot of you, men, whether you raise your hand or not, you're nodding. You feel that at some level. And so the decision when Jesus says, come to me and I will give you rest, and then he says you'll find rest for your souls, man, that's just a different level of rest. That's just a different level. And man, if I don't want anything, I want that deep rest. Let me try to help you understand just another level of things. Every morning, outside of maybe a Saturday morning, I get up and have at least 1, if not 2 cups of coffee. That's every day. Routine. Get up, make coffee. If I get here first, I make it. If Cody gets here, he makes it. Coffee every day. But can I just tell you that there's some mornings that I drink that coffee and I open my Bible that coffee just hits a little bit different? It's like in a moment of that, especially on a good cold morning, you drink that first sip of coffee and you look at God's creation, you look at his word, and all of a sudden that warmth of that coffee, it's not like it was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. All of a sudden it's like, like it's almost as if the Lord uses coffee to say, I got you. That's for me. Now maybe not you, but for me. That even in that moment of it just, and I think here, this rest that Jesus is talking about, it's even better than coffee that hits different in a cold morning. It just hits, it's not taking a nap and getting up and going, okay, I slept 8 hours last night. That's better than the 6 I got the night before, the 2 I got the night before. 8 was good. This rest hits different, and it empowers all the things that we do. And so Jesus is asking them, which way do you want to go? Which way do you want to bear your burdens? Which yoke do you want to take on your shoulders? Who will you trust? Because you've done it your way with all the other yokes. You've done it with all the other ways, and you're laboring and you're heavy laden. But my yoke is easy and my burden is light. That word easy is so misleading for us. We're like, well, so Ben, are you saying that if I just come to Jesus, follow Jesus, life just gets easy? No, it gets different. That's what the word easy there really points to. It gets different. There's a weight that beats you down on your own, and there's an easier way when Jesus walks beside you and helps you to carry your burdens. There's an easier way to take his yoke. His yoke is easy. His burden is light because you're not on your own. And I just think there's some of you in the room that when it comes to the weight of trusting, one of the reasons that it feels so heavy is because you're carrying it by yourself. You're just carrying it yourself. You're trying to portray strength. Man, this is who I am. I got this. And listen to me, you may have it today, but you won't have it tomorrow. Your ability to push through, at some point it hits a wall of concrete. At some point, it hits a wall. And yes, you might push through some things, but there's some things down the road that if you're not walking with the one who made all those things, you're never going to get through. And so he says, come to me. My yoke is easy. My burden is light. The invitation is to come to him and to trust him, not with part of it and in addition to, but instead of, to trust him with all of it. And make no mistake, he's not saying that your burdens are going to go away. He's just saying they're going to be lighter because he's going to carry it. And so here's the question I want to put in front of you. I think there's a lot of you in the room that your story is similar to mine, that you're a follower of Jesus. And it might have been the events of last week. You might be in a season of hard, difficult things. And so here's my question for you. When's the last time that you just came to Jesus and said, I trust you? That you just stopped and you just said to him, Lord, I trust you. I don't have answers, but Lord, I trust you. I trust you. Because aren't you tired of bearing all the weight of your grief? Aren't you tired of bearing all the weight of the things that you feel like you have to do? Aren't you tired of bearing the weight of your secrets? Why not trust him? And look, these aren't just flowery words. I'm not trying to get you to print a t-shirt that just says, come to me. Man, this is a promise from the one who made it all. That if you will come to me, I'll take the heaviness of your burdens and I'll give you rest. If you'll come to me and walk with me and live life with me, I'm going to let you find rest for your souls. And then listen to me. Think about who's saying that. This is not a preacher on stage saying, hey, if you'll just try these 10 steps, life will get easier for you. Listen to me. In Colossians chapter 1, I love the way that the Apostle Paul puts this. I don't even have to look it up. Verse 17 says this. 15, he is the image of the invisible God. He created all things, sustains all things, holds all things together. There's nothing that has been made that he did not make and hold right now. He is the firstborn from the dead. He is the head of the church, that in all things he might be preeminent. This one who has said, come to me and I will give you rest. He didn't need our help creating everything that is. He spoke. And everything we know came into being. And he says to you and he says to me, come to me and I will give you rest. Why would we try anything else? So when's the last time that you found that rest? It's the last time that you just said to him, Lord, I trust you. But I would also say to some of you in the room that the answer to that question for you is I've never trusted him. I've heard the stories and I've been around, but it's never been a reality for me. Listen to me, the same one that spoke all those things into being, the one that is the image of the invisible God, he is not just somebody who promises to give you rest. He is someone who took on flesh and died for your sin and for mine. And your first step of trusting is not going to be just resting. Your first step of trusting is going to be just coming to him and asking him to forgive you of your sin and to give you life. And the life that he gives, man, it is a yoke that is easy and a burden that is light. You've gone on your own long enough. Why not stop today and say, Jesus, I trust you. Forgive me of my sin and give me the new life you promised. I believe you lived, you died, and you rose again. And why are we waiting to trust the one who has done everything necessary for us to come and to find what we're looking for? Here's what I want to do to end this morning. If you would, put your things away. And I know you're busy. I know you got things to get to and things to do. And so I want to give you just one quick exercise that we'll do together. We're going to take 60 seconds. I know it doesn't seem long, but trust me, in a quiet room, it feels long. But I want you to just take 60 seconds and right where you sit, wherever you're at in your faith journey, whatever you know about God or how to pray, I'm not going to ask you to do anything out loud, but just right where you sit, with every head bowed, nobody looking around, would you just tell God, I trust you? God, I trust you. Or maybe this morning you would say to him, Lord, I'm struggling. I'm struggling. Would you help me to trust? But wherever you're at, take 60 seconds and let's do that together. God, we need you this morning. Father, so many different stories in here today, so many things being carried. And God, we've tried to do it on our own. And God, I'm grateful this morning for the powerful invitation of Jesus when he said, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." Father, I pray for this group of people. God, I pray that we would come. We would be given and we would find a rest that our world does not offer, so that you might be magnified and glorified in all that we do. Father, would you help us? Would you help us to know that we belong to you and your promises to us are always good? In Jesus' name, amen.